Hi, welcome to SAP UI5 tutorial. So today in this tutorial we are going to learn something called as a split app. Okay, before getting to the split app concept, so let's have a look at some design here. Okay, so let's say this is a web application which we have, and this is a web page. So in case if you want to split this web page into the two parts, let's say like this. So one is the master part and the second one is the detail part. Okay, so in this part, in case if you want to display all the details of the students or list of employees or list of students, whenever you select an employee over here or a student over here, you are going to display the total details of the selected person over here, right? So that means you are trying to split the application to the two parts. One is the master part and the second one is the detail part. So in case if you want to develop these kind of patterns or this kind of design with the help of SAP UI5, there is something called as split app. Okay, so there is a control called split app, so using which you can develop uh, the split apps. Yeah, if you have a look at the the documentation for the split app, so let's search for split app, or it's a single word. Yeah, so this is the control which is available in SAP M library. So you can use this particular split app control to develop a split applications. Yeah, so if you can see here, the properties is home icon and range is changed. So what you can do is, let's see what is yes, this is the parent class of the split app. So let's go here, split container. Okay, if you can go here, you can see, you can search for the aggregations and what are all the properties available over here, right? So if you can see here, there are two aggregations called master pages and detail pages, right? So with the help of master pages, you can display all the master pages. Let's say for example, the list of students or the list of employees. So in the detail page, so you can display the details of that particular employees or the students. Okay, yes, so these are the things available. So in case if you want to develop an application for, with the help of the split app, so I have developed one. So you can see the one which I have developed over here. Okay, so we are going to develop the same in this particular tutorial. So if you can see here, these are all the, here in the master section. So I'm displaying all the list of students. Okay, all the students over here. Here there is a search criteria, so I didn't implement this. Okay, so if you can search for the students over here, but I did not implement this. And if you can see here, there is an add button. So with the help of add button, you can add the students. So once you click on this add button, you can see, so there is one more page displayed in the detail section saying that you just enter uh, the student. Okay, let's say Saran, and then let's say Kumar, and then let's say Reddy. Yeah, so in here, in case if you want to, let's say for example, let's take some random number, random date, and then let's say contact number 12345678990. And if you click on save button over here, you can see the save button. So if you click on the save button, then obviously we're going to save this particular student details, right? So when you click on this save, so as of now we have only four students over there in the master page. If you click on save, then obviously one student will get added to the list in the left hand side. Okay, I'm just pressing the save button, you can observe. So one thing got added over here, and then again all these values got reset. So he is here 7. In case if you click on this student, so then you can see here that student details is the one which I'm displaying over here. If you click on student 2, accordingly the student 2 details. If I click on this 7, so obviously you're displaying the details of Saren. So we are going to develop this particular application in this tutorial. Yeah, so let's open Eclipse for this. Okay, so if you can see here, so from the last tutorials we have been following the same workspace, and this is what the component which I have developed. So what I can do for this one is I just simply copy paste this. So in case if you want to see where it is, then go to this here, and then I have this one in here. Okay, so let's go to that particular location. Okay, so here I have my component. So what I'll do is I'll just copy this and I will paste it over here, and then just rename it to split app. Okay, split app, yes, I renamed it, and let's open this and copy this location and try to import it again to the Eclipse. Okay, so let's go back to the Eclipse and give a right click here. Okay, go to import, yes, import option, import file, so general, and then existing workspace, existing projects into the workspace, and then click on next, and then give a location over here, and then you can import it. Okay, so what I did as of so far is I just copy pasted this particular project with a different name. That's it. I just imported again into this workspace. Okay, so now let's make sure that this project is up and running. Because why I copy pasted in the sense, so in the previous tutorial we created a component, and then with the help of component we are trying to implement the navigations and all. So in this tutorial we are going to continue with the same navigation stuff and component stuff. Okay, we are going to implement the same on top of this particular component, so instead of creating from the scratch. Yeah, so let's try to run this particular project. If it is up and running, then we can continue with the implementation of the current requirement what we took in this tutorial. Yeah, so it's running, so it may take some couple of minutes. Yeah, well, let's wait for that. Yes, if you can see here, the project is up and running. So what I will do is I'll just simply copy paste this one into the external browser. Yes, into the external browser. Okay, paste it over here. So this is the first tab is ours, and this is up and running. Yeah, so this is now okay. So now we are going to modify this page. Let's have a look at the existing application. In case if you want to run this particular, create the application like this, so we have to use something called a split app container. So for that, what we have to do is, so let's go back to the code, and in here, okay, so we have something called as a component, right? So let's have a look at the component. So if you can see here in this component, let's say what I will do is I will remove all these existing roots. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll go back here, and then we are rendering the app view dot xml. So let's go back to the view, and in here what is there in app. Okay, if you can see here, there is something called as app. Okay, so instead of app, so what we have to use in here is split app, right? So because we are trying to develop something called as split app. Okay, and then you have to give the corresponding ID and all. Okay, what I will do is, so I will give a split app. Okay, save this, and then go back to your component. Whichever the roots you have deleted from here, you delete all these. Okay, second and third, so we don't want this as of now. Okay, so I'm deleting all this. Okay, so fine. So now what we can do is, let's go back to the browser and then try to refresh this. This one, go here. Okay, so you can see here now the page got rendered into the two parts. One is master section, and the second one is the detail section, right? So that means the by default the split up will render the page like this. So now what we have to do is, so what we did so far is, like, we went to this particular page. Yeah, yes, if you can go to this component file, so here you can see the configuration details. So here we are using this type, and then view path is here, and control target control is this one. So this is the name of, sorry, this is the ID of the app container. So here now what we are using is the split app. So instead of this, we have to use this particular ID control, this particular ID we have to use, right? So let's go back here and then give the same this one, and then if you can see here, target aggregation and target aggregation. So split app has two different aggregations. One is master pages, and the second one is detail page. So instead of configuring all these things, so we are going to use in this particular application, in this tutorial, we are going to use something called as targets. Okay, so what we can do is, so we can implement, instead of configuring this control aggregation all here, so you can just remove this configuration over there. So what you can do is, instead of giving this a view name over here, so you can give something called as target. Okay, so target is equals to, so let's say, okay, so let me configure the target over here. So let's say here I'm just giving a target equals to student list, right? So what is this student list? We need to configure this somewhere, saying that this is what the student list. So because this is of type target, right? So here what you can do is, you can create one more object called as targets. Okay, so targets, so inside target is an object. Okay, so inside this object, this is a property, so which is having, again, it is a property, and it is of type an object. Okay, so in this, let's say it's a student list. Okay, I'm just giving the name of the target as student list, and I'm creating that particular target over here. So in this target, what I'm going to mention is, what is the view name, what is the view level, what is the view ID and control and everything. Yeah, okay, so here I had mentioned all these things. Okay, if you can see here, what is the view name? My view name is first. Okay, view level, so view level is 1 I have given over here, and view ID you can give anything, and control ID is ID split app control. So that means this is what the ID, right? So and then what I'm doing, this is like, so this is the view which is gonna take this particular control, and in this control it is gonna occupy, I mean it is gonna render this particular view in this particular aggregation. Okay, so what we have given is, so we have given the name of the view is first. So okay, so let's remove all this one. Okay, so let's remove this and create something called as first view dot xml. Okay, so let's create a view. Okay, so here the name of the view is first. Okay, it is of type xml. Okay, click on finish, and here you can give a student list. Okay, so just save this and go back to your browser and then execute that. Okay, so just execute this, and you can see now I am able to render this particular view in the master pages aggregation. Okay, so this is the page which I have rendered over here, but if you can give the footer, you can easily observe the difference. Okay, let me go back to this particular XML file, and then here let's try to create a footer. Okay, so footer, and then in this footer we are gonna give just a simple toolbar. Okay, so the toolbar will be having some add icon, right? So let's say the way we have we have these particular add icons, in the same way we are gonna render that. So how can we do that? So let's go here, and then inside a footer create a toolbar. Okay, so create a toolbar, and this is the space and this is the space, so that we are making sure that this particular button is rendered in the mid of the page or mid of the footer. Yeah, so this is how it's gonna render, right? So now what I will do is, so I'll just go back to the browser and let's execute this, so this is our page. So let's refresh this. Okay, so here you can see there is an add button, right? So this is a student list and this is an add button. Okay, so in this student, so we are going to render the list of students, right? So in case if you want to render something called as a list, I mean in case if you want to render the list, then obviously there is something called as list control available in SAP UI5. Okay, so let's configure the list control. So in the go to the content aggregation of the page. Okay, so because the content contains the content of the page. Yeah. So we created a list. So list has something called as items aggregation. We are going to bind these items to this particular array. Okay, let's look at this array. What is this array and what is this binding later? Okay, we are now, as of now, what we did was, so we created an array and there is a items aggregation. To this items aggregation we binded an object called students object inside it. So right, so now what you can do is, so let's configure the items aggregation inside a list. Okay, so items by items. Okay, so inside this items, so items is going to accept any one of the items. Let's say for example there is so many items. Okay, I'm just taking one of the items, like there is something called a standard list item. Okay, so I'm using that standard list item to render that. So if you go to this API, so you can search for standard. Okay, standard list item, you can see here there is something called a standard list item. I'm using this particular control to render this list. Okay, so if you can see what are the properties, there is an icon, and then there is a title, and there is a description, and there is something called as navigation and press event. So if you can see here, I'm using the normal employee just to render the user symbol. I'm just using this particular icon, and title is the name of the student, and then description is I'm just mentioning the date of birth. I'm just binded this description property to the date of birth property inside an object. Okay, and type is navigation type, so that it will render the arrow mark, and then here press event. Whenever we press this, I'm just executing this one. So obviously in case if you want to execute, okay, let's configure all these things later. Yeah, for the being of time, what you can do is, let's go back to the browser and then refresh. Let's see how the UI looks. Okay, yes, so this is how the list got rendered. So here it is saying that no data, because we are binded that particular list to the students array, but we didn't set a model to that. So it is saying that it didn't identify that particular array, so inside the model. So that is the reason it is saying that no data in that. Okay, so if you want to render some search field on top of the list, then obviously there is something called as search field in SAP UI5. You have to use that particular control, so that obviously it will render the search field. So let's go back to the Eclipse in here, and then XML, and then type search field so that it will render the search field. Okay, so let's go back to the browser and then see how how the UI looks now. Yeah, so now if you refresh this, so you can see search bar over here. So now what we need to do is we need to prepare the data for that, right? So in case if you want to prepare the data, as we discussed in the previous tutorials, this component, this is a standard way of developing SAP UI5. So in here we have something called as mock data. So this particular mock data contains the total data, right? So we are just reading this mock data inside the component. If you can see here, so this is where we are yes, this is where we are reading this particular mock data. Where is this? So this mock data URL, and then we are setting the model to the component. Okay, so now we have to prepare the mock data. To prepare the mock data, that means it is expecting students array, right? So that means, so let's create something called as students. Okay, students, it is an array type, right? So let's give this one in double quotes. Okay, so this is an array, and use open and closed square brackets. Yeah, like this, and here you need to give the total students, right? So let me give the total students. Okay, so I have only few students with me, just sample data. Okay, so this is the list of students which I have. So students, it is enough type array, and in here first name and last name, and it is the common properties for all. So then I have one more object called student object inside this. So okay, so let's go here and then create the student object as well, right? Okay, so yes, so I have all these students and student objects inside this particular object. Yeah, so now let me go back to this browser, and if you refresh this browser, it will render the data. If you can see here, so how it is rendering, because we are setting the this total, we are reading the mock data from the component.js, and we are setting the model in here. Once the model we set without name, then obviously it's a default model, and we are reading this particular model in here. That means these particular students will be pointing to this particular students array. Okay, so this is how it is rendering. With the help of the navigation property, we are able to render this particular navigation symbol, and this is the icon, right? So when you, okay, let's see. So now if you click on this one, or if you let me implement this particular add button. Okay, we can implement the navigation later. So if you click the add button, then we are going to render a different page wherein you can prompt the user to enter all the details, right? So let's implement the particular add button. So let's go back to the Eclipse. Okay, so in the Eclipse, what you can do is, so where is this add button? Yeah, this is the add button. So we need to implement this particular method now. Okay, so let's go back to the controller and let's try to uncomment the methods. As of now, it's not mandatory to uncomment all the methods, but as I told you before, so I'm just used to this particular practice. Yeah, okay, fine. So I have created something called as handle add student method. Okay, so now we are going to implement this particular method. So let's say what is the functionality of this method? When the user press this button, so we are going to render a different page, right? So that means we have to create a different view in here. What is that view? So let's create one view called go to the others and view, and in here give something called as new student. Okay, new student. Okay, it is of type XML, and then click on finish. So we have created this view. So give the title as new student. Okay, so then let's go back to our first controller. Okay, so let's go back to our first controller, and we need to implement this particular method. So okay, so what I can do is, so I can get the router object in here. Okay, so once you get the router object, so we are going to navigate to a different page. Okay, so we are going to navigate to this particular page, new student view. Okay, so in here, so what we have to mention is, so what is this particular navigate to this, right? So this is the name of the what is that? This is the name of that particular target. So let me go to this component. So here, in case if you want to navigate to that particular route, so that is the name of the route. Okay, so we have to configure that particular route over here, right? So what I can do is, I'll just copy this. Okay, and give a command, try to create a new entry saying that what is this, and this is this new student, right? Let me go here and this. Okay, new student view, and here what is that pattern? So let's say the pattern will be a new student. Okay, and then the target. Okay, so the target is, okay, so I'm gonna give the target like this. Let me remove this. Okay, this is the new target. Okay, student list and this one. So now we need to create this particular, if you can see here, this is the target. Okay, so this, whenever this particular route will get execute, so it will execute this target. In this target there are two things. So the first one is student list is this one, so which will render in a master page, and this is a new student is another target, so which we don't have here. So we're going to create this particular target now. Okay, so this target will get, okay, let's see the configuration of this particular target. Okay, so in this particular target, what we are trying to render, so we are trying to render the newly created view into the detailed aggregation, right? So that means the view name is the new student. This particular view will be rendered in this particular control at this particular aggregation. Okay, so let's save this. That means what, this particular pattern, so whenever you navigate to this, it has the two targets. One, that means what, so within this particular application, okay, within this particular split app, so we are navigating to a different thing, different target. In that target we mentioned keep this existing target as the same, and then render the different one in a new, I mean to say the detailed pages, right? So that's what it is. Okay, so now let me refresh this particular screen. Okay, so if I click on add button, you can see the new student got rendered, right? So now we are going to implement this particular view. So in case if you want to implement the view, then obviously we need to ask the user to enter the username, password and blah blah things, right? So what we can do is we can implement something called as a simple form, wherein you can ask the user to add the details of the student, right? So let me go back to the Eclipse, and then here, so what is the, where is this particular new student? So in here, inside the content aggregation, you try to add all the forms, right? So it is saying that what is this F? Okay, so F and L, right? So we have to use that particular namespaces in here. Okay, so this is a simple form which is having the content and then basic information and then new students and then labels, date of birth and contact number. We are binded to the student. So if you can see here in the model, there is an object called student. Inside the student I have something called as first name, middle name and then last name and then what is icon and blah blah things, right? So save this one and then go back to your browser and refresh the browser so that you can see here. So let me remove this. Okay, let me remove the pattern over there. So if you can add, click on this add, so it will ask for all the details. Okay, so now, so once you enter all the details, there will be something called as footer, so wherein you can press some button. Obviously you're gonna get the data and you're gonna add this data to the list, right? So just try to render the footer over here. So for that, let's go back to the Eclipse and then in the new student, so create something called as footer navigation and then toolbar and then one save button. Okay, save this and then go back to your browser. Let's see whether the UI will get rendered properly. Let's remove this hash. Okay, and then refresh this. Yes, so if you click on this, so you will be having some add button, right? So when you click on this, you are going to save the details into this particular student, right? So let's try to implement this behavior. Okay, let's go back to the Eclipse and then here new student controller, let's uncomment only, don't uncomment, I can say. So instead of uncommenting everything, so what we can do is we can directly implement the method over here. Okay, what is the name of the method? The name of the method is handle student save, right? So so handle student save. So okay, so we need to implement that method. First of all, we need to create that particular method inside that, okay, inside the controller. So let's create a method called handle student save. Okay, so in here in this method, so we are going to implement, so let's get the model first. Okay, so we are getting the model which is binded already to this particular view. From this particular model, what we are trying to do is we are going to get the data out of that. Okay, so let's get the data which is there inside the model. So once you get the data and get the student object, because we are going to try to we are going to try to get the student details, because once the user enters, then obviously the data will be updated in the model. So in the model which I'm using is model.getProperty students. I'm just stringifying and then parsing, so that we will be relieving from the object reference. Okay, now it will become object, now it will become call by value, not call by reference. Okay, so now what you can do is, so you can add this particular data. Okay, what you get here, this student odata.students.push, you are trying to push this particular student into the students array. Okay, so once you push all the data to the students array, then what you are doing over here is odata.student. Okay, so odata.student, that means odata in the sense this data represents all this data. Okay, so in this data dot student, so that's what it is. Okay, so you are going here and then you are just resetting all the values, and then finally once you update the data, then you just set the data back to the model like this. Okay, so then obviously the data will be added to the model. Okay, that means whichever the new values you enter, that will be added to this particular students. Accordingly the view value will get update. Okay, so let's go back to the application and here remove this hash and then try to refresh the application and click on this add. Now you try to give the name. So let's say I'm giving Saren and then Kumar, and then middle name is last name is Reddy, and then let's say date of birth is some random date, and then contact number is like some value. If I click on this save, you can see here there is a data got entered. So now what you can do is whenever the user clicks on this particular selects the students, then obviously we need to render the student details in the detailed page in this particular section. So for that again we need to implement a different target and a different view and different navigations, right? So whenever the user press on this, then obviously we have to render a different view in the detail section in here. So for that let's create a view. Okay, so let's create a view called since it is a first, so let's create something called as second controller or view. Okay, so let me select a view. So in here, so select CCONT. Okay, second view of type XML and then click on finish. Okay, so you can say student. Okay, details. Okay, so student details. So in here we are trying to implement the student details, right? So what we can do is, so we can take one VBox. Okay, so we can take one VBox. So inside this VBox, I'm just gonna render all the details. Okay, so one HBox so I'm just gonna align all these things in the center. So let me create like this. Yeah, okay, so I have a HBox. Inside the HBox, one portion of the HBox is having the first name and the second portion of the HBox is having the data in it, right? So if you can see here, I'm just setting the student model. Okay, I'll explain you this one so later. So that means I'm just getting all these values from the student model. Okay, so like this I have a few more details. Okay, so if you want to display the date of birth, display the date of birth, and then this is of label, and then this is a text which is binded to this particular property inside this particular model. Okay, so that means we are expecting some data from the different model, in the sense we have to create that model, so we can create the model later. Okay, so let's create one more field called as contact number, which is getting from this particular model. So now we are done with an XML file. So what you can do is, so when the user clicks on the button, when the clicks on this particular when the user selects an item inside a list, so then we have to render this particular thing. So for that, so there is a event handler configured for the press of list item. So let me go back to the first view. Yes, so if you can see here, this is the this is the callback handler which we have when the user presses on that. So we have to implement this, right? So let's go back to your controller and then try to configure this method over here, right? So handle student select. Okay, so it's a function, right? So it is a function, and then try to implement the function. Okay, so now what we need to do is, so we need to get when the user clicks on that, so what we have is o event is the one. So o event dot o source dot get binding context on get object. So it will give you the object which is behind that particular selected student. Okay, so this is what, so that is the student which is there behind that particular list item. Once you get the student object, so what you can do is this dot, you can, there is a model as we discussed in while creating the XML. So there is a model called student model. We are getting the student model, and then we are trying to set this particular data to the student model. Okay, so now, so let's see if the student model exists. Okay, if the student model exists, then what you do is student model dot set data, and then we are setting the data. Okay, so once you set the student model, once you know update the data in the student model, so what you can do is you can get the router object and you can navigate to that particular page, right? So let's see what is this student model. So since we nowhere we set this particular student model, so where we can set the student model, we can go back to the component. Okay, so let me go back to the component. In the component level, you will have to set the student model. Okay, so in case if you want to set the student model, so what is the what is the model, which type of model it is? So it is of type JSON model. So I'll just come here and then what I do is, so JSON model, new JSON model, and then just this dot set the model with this particular name. If you can see here, what is the JSON model? JSON model is this particular thing. This is pointing to this particular class in SAP UI5. Okay, so this is how we set model, and then we are going to update the model into this we are going to update the model data inside this first controller, and then we are navigating to the second view. Okay, save this second view, in the sense we need to create the targets, right? So let's go to the component.js again. Okay, let's go to the component.js again. So if you go to the routing concept, is there anything called a second view here? No, right? So there is nothing called as second view. So what you can do is you can create one second view. Okay, so you will have to create one second view. So obviously let's copy paste the above code, or what I can do is, let me configure like this. Okay, so this is the student details, the pattern is the student details, and this is the second view, which you can see here the target is student list. Whenever you display the details of the student, okay, whenever you display the details of the student here, this should get remain, right? It should remain the same. So that is the reason I am using so this student list, so which will always render in the master page, and then student details is again one more target, so which we don't have here, so we need to create that particular target. Okay, so in this particular student new details target, so we are trying to render the second view, and then this particular view will be rendered in this particular control ID. Okay, this control ID is nothing but a split application, and this particular view will be rendered in the detailed pages aggregation of this particular split app control. Okay, so let's save this. Okay, let's save this and go back to your browser. Okay, so go back to your browser and try to refresh this particular page. Okay, yes, so let me click on this. You can see here the details got rendered in here. Yeah, so first student, if I click on this, you can see, if I click on the second student, you can see the second student. Okay, if I click on third student, you can see the third student details. If you click on this one, you can see the fourth student, right? So let's say in case if you want to enter a new student, click on this, it will be navigating to a different page, and let's try to enter details of the student like this. Okay, then try to enter the date of birth, and then try to enter a different contact number. Okay, and click on save. Okay, so you can see the seren here. If you click on this, you can see the seren details. If you click on this, first student first, and then this is the student 1, and if you click on student 4, student 4. Okay, so this is how we are going to implement the split app in SAP UI5, and corresponding navigations to the detail pages, and let's say detail page. And let's say for example, in case if you want to have the detail navigation within the master page, you can also implement that one, so depending upon your requirement. Okay, so this is how we are going to implement the split application in SAP UI5. And yes, so maybe in the next tutorial, so we're gonna go ahead with, we're gonna use in the next tutorial the same application, just to implement something called as filters concept in SAP UI5. Okay, so if you can see here, we have a search bar, but we did not implement the search functionality, right? So in the next tutorial, we're gonna use the same application to implement the filters concept. Okay, thanks for watching.